Okay, so welcome to the lecture about editing workflow. This reflects my own personal experience with making movies and television shows. I produce a talk show, as I've told you in other lectures, and I made a graduate student feature when I was working on my PhD. So this reflects that kind of lived experience. And these arrows are kind of hard to follow, but essentially, in my mind, you go along these 9 steps to get from the beginning of your edit to the exporting of the movie. Now, a couple things to note as we go through this in step one, importing video and elements. You always have to take all raw material out of your download folder, off of your SD card, off of some kind of random location on your hard drive, and put it into a dedicated space that's named in a way that's easy to find. I think maybe you should have the folder be the name of your film so that everything is contained inside that one folder. That's so important when you have a crash and you lose your timeline, right? Adobe's great about backing up timelines every 5 minutes or so, it backs up. So if you know where to find the backup files, you'll only lose 3 or 4 minutes of work, which is a massive relief when you are editing and you have something horrible happen, some kind of catastrophe. Now, I also believe that you should back up the machine itself every day. So, yes, I have my Adobe set up, I have my backup turned on. I'm creating every 5 minutes a new backup in my Adobe folder. But at the end of every workday, I take and I copy that entire folder over to an external hard drive that I unplug and put somewhere else because I don't want any kind of catastrophe to happen. I spill a drink on my laptop, or there's something, the hard drive crashes. I don't want to lose all of that work. So I believe in multiple redundancies, multiple backups, and it served me over my long producing career where knock on wood, I haven't lost a show that kind of technological problem. I mean, I've lost a show for other reasons, or I've killed a show because I didn't like the content, or I didn't like the way it looked or sounded. But that was an active decision, whereas losing your files is something that is frustrating because you can't control it. Okay, so you get everything into your timeline, and you move from there into the rough cut. And I do think you're doing in your bin some editing. You're going through all of your raw material in the bin and you're finding the shots that you like, marking those shots with an in and an out point. I like to set up Adobe so that it's all visual, so that I'm using my bin itself to do some pre-editing work. Then I take all those pre-edited cuts and I move them into a timeline in some way that makes sort of cohesive sense based on a script. And then I think from there I have a rough cut that I put away. I come back to it in a few days. I ask people to look at it for notes. And once that rough cut is done, then you can move into your other components to get to pick lock, right? So color correction in my mind comes next. Adding the music in to seeing how it all fits together. I haven't yet done an audio mix though, right? It's kind of a rough edit of music and audio. I've got some tracks muted out. I've got songs in place, but I'm not listening to them right now at this part of the edit. I just know where they're supposed to be in the movie. Then you do a more fine edit, which is cutting out individual frames. I mean, really getting your movie to look exactly like you want it to. And then finally, you achieve pick lock. And pick lock is when the director says, "I'm done with my editorial or content changes in the movie. This is the movie. It's the duration. All the scenes are in the right place. All the jokes are on the right beat. Everything is correct, even though technically it's not there yet. Um, I may have to do more color correction, and certainly after pick lock, I have to do my audio mix. And it is taboo to make a change that's going to change your duration even by 1 frame when you're in your audio mix, because if an audio editor is working on that, or if you're working with a team and you've cut out 1 frame, everything after that will be out of sync. And so it's not done, right? You don't call pick lock until you know you're finished. and then you go through and you do a final color grade and your audio mix. And then remember that it's going to take a long time to render the movie, especially if you have effects in there. If it's a long movie, it's going to take a long time to render it and a long time to export it. So you should never press that up against the deadline. If you have a film due on a certain day at a certain time, you really want to be rendering it and exporting it at least a few days before it's due. And so I think this is a fairly accurate post production timeline. And it's a lot faster talking through it than it actually takes place. This is days and days and days of work, hours of work, months to get to each of these steps along the way. Um, and if you're at pick lock and you have to make an editorial change, you're not really at pick lock, are you? You're still doing your fine edit. So it's when that fine edit is done that you say, okay, now I can pass this film in this form onto the audio team. Okay, so one thing to say about importing media is, I mean, I'm going to walk through the steps here. Just be really precise about it. I think it's best to have a file tree that's super clear, all music in one folder, all effects, all raw video, all interviews. Because when you need that little piece to fix something, you don't want to have to go back through and dig through a ton of raw material. And so it makes a lot of sense in your timeline to do all of that work up front. Really look through everything, really divide it up and categorize it and sort it so that when you're in a crisis point and you're crashing to finish, you know exactly where to look to find that one little thing that you need. Okay, so color grading is hugely important, and it's worth learning how to do this now. And we have talked about this obviously in other lectures. Um, Learn to use to use the scopes, use the RGB parade, especially when you're doing a color grade. And if your camera is, say, a Sony Alpha and it shoots in camera raw, make sure that you're putting the right templates and preset color palettes onto your raw video. It does that so that you have more space to work with it in post production. But if you leave it as is, your movie's going to look terrible. So it's giving you more to do, both in the process to get there, but also in the end, it's giving you a lot more creativity and a lot more space. So if you're using one of these high-end mirrorless cameras, make sure that you understand that you've got to do um, presets to get the colors to look like what you want them to look like. Okay, so I have done a pod lecture on music, but these are three of the sites that I like best. And if you haven't watched the pod lecture yet, you can see here from the screen archive.org, Moby Gratis, and Danos Songs are three that I like. And I'm not a paid promoter of any of these sites. It's just when I needed music for my work, this is where I've gone to buy the license or get a free license, depending on the particular uh, circumstances, whether the movie's a student film or a commercial film selling a product. You can get a license with different characteristics based on those different parameters, but you always have to have a license of some sort, whether it's Creative Commons or a person purchase license that lasts, say, 10 years worldwide. Okay, fine edit we spoke about. Pick lock, that's really one of the director's favorite moments in the film, because it means you're almost done. The audio mix, certainly, you have to remember with your audio mix that you should be peaking at -9 decibels or somewhere between -6 and 12, depending on where you're submitting your film to. They'll have different parameters, but I think if you target -9, that's a good average number and will make it so that your movie doesn't overmodulate or distort. Don't forget that when you render, it's going to take a lot of time, and then export finally your film. And that is a quick lecture on um, workflow, editing workflow in a student movie, a short movie, or even a professional movie.